So here we are for round 3 of the Core Racing GT3 League. We are here at Nurburgring this week doing the GP layout as qualifying has begun and drivers have done their out lap, so most drivers are on their flying lap. As you see, Ho currently sitting provisional P1 with a 156, however that will change by the end of this session, I am sure, as he gets cleanly through the long hairpin. So we have a look at the results from last week. You can see that Ross ended up winning the race last week actually, and he ended up currently in the lead in the table, being followed by his teammate Nickel Foggy. Both drivers actually on the same amount of points, both on 86 points, with Chris Redmond shortly behind in P3 with 78 points, followed by the other English driver Darren Adams in P4 with Martin Palm in P5 with 72 points. Jeffrey, Luca, Thomas Blackett all in P6, P7 and P8, followed by Michael Curves and Ho making up your top 10. As we go to and see how the table, as the team standings has changed, as you see NLR with Thrustmaster are now in the lead with 150 points, thanks to Ross and Nickel both winning and coming second in that for around Spa, with Apex Predator Racing in P2 with 134 points, followed by the Flying Dutchman Motorsports, Black Widow Racing and Torrent Motorsports in making up the top 5. So as we come on back to the action in qualifying, as it looks like Costi has abandoned his lap. However, it looks like Michael Kurz is currently your race leader with a qualifying leader, with a 154.3. Can't get my words right today. As you see, he's coming around the long hairpin, as it looks like Jeffrey Ruskus in P2 didn't have the best of results last week at Spa. He won the round 1 actually at Silverstone, so we'll have to see whether he has any more luck this week. You see Peo coming through the Schumacher S's, it looks like someone slightly dipped a wheel. As there's Jeffrey Langeruk, I think he finished P4 or something like that last week at Spa in that 650S, coming up to the chicane. Gets it nice and clean through there. Big flame shooting out the rear as he gets a little twitch on the exit. That looks like Michael Curves has gone off. We'll have to see whether Jeffrey is able to improve on this lap, as I believe that's Chris Redmond up in front of him. And he goes with a 154.9. However, Peo goes faster with a 154.3. He is currently your pole position holder. Jeffrey's out on his out lap. Here's Eric Rotterdink. He had quite a good drive last week, however ended up near the back of the field. He's up in P5 currently in the GTR. Most drivers opting for the soft tyre. You see Eric sitting in P5 with a 155.1. So we have a look to see whether any other drivers are close to finishing their lap as Martin Palm comes into the chicane. We'll have to see whether he's able to improve. He's just 0.8083 off P5 of Eric Rotterdink. We'll see whether he's able to improve, which he does. He ends up in P4 with a 154.59. As you see, Ross McFarlane down in P8, a lot lower than what he was at Spa. However, he has got 7 minutes left of the qualifying session. So we'll have to see whether he is able to jump up any places to get up into the lead, or into pole position, sorry, to get into the lead for turn 1 in the race. As he comes on down into the chicane. Gets it nicely through the first section, nice and smooth through the second. Keeping it nice and clean. Opting for third gear to try and get the drive out of the corner. Is he able to improve is the question, which he does. He goes into P2 with a 154.429. So we hop on board with your current pole as he comes through the final corner. He is on an out lap, however, so we will have to see whether he is able to increase the gap to Michael Curves, as it's only 17 hundredths of a second difference separating them. Running slightly wide into turn 1 as it looks like a Lamborghini decides to bail on his hot lap. See pair getting it nicely through the Mercedes arena. Nicely through turns 4 and 5 as he gets quite a big slide out of there. He may have lost some time. We'll have to wait and see for the end of the lap. Gets it flicked nicely into the right hander as he dives and down into the hairpin. As it looks like my game has just crashed, unfortunately, so we'll have to relaunch quickly. Sorry, didn't realise my microphone was muted for that time. So, as I was saying, your grid positions are still the same as when we unfortunately got disconnected. So Peo is still your leader, with Michael Curves in third, Ross in third, sorry, Michael in second as Ross comes around the final corner. Will he be able to improve? We will have to wait and see. Which he does, he goes faster with a 1:54.043, and that means Peo will have to do his fastest lap on this lap, otherwise he won't have time. He's slightly out of shake on the exit of the right-hander of turn 11. Gets it nicely on the run up the hill to the chicane. Gets it nicely flicked in to the chicane using all the exit. As that marks the end of the session, will Peo be able to improve and beat the 1:54 flat from Ross? Which unfortunately is not, however he does go faster with a 1:54.2. As we hop with Jeffrey, he's coming through Mercedes Arena, so we'll have to see whether he is able to improve. Martin Palm still sitting in P5 after his lap. Eric Rotterdink in P9. Will he be able to improve? He's going to have to lose over a second if he's going to gain a position, so we'll have to wait and see. Gets nicely out of the final turn. Unfortunately he's not able to improve as we come back with Jeffrey. Getting the McLaren nicely through there. Gets it nicely on the brakes. As we ride on board for the final sector of the lap. As you can see, a really determined face under that helmet of Jeffrey. As he comes hard on the brakes into the chicane, using all the curb on the inside, all the curb on the exit as well, really pushing the car to its limits to try and gain as much time as he can. Will he be able to improve? No, he sits in P4. So your results for qualifying and your grid for race run will be Ross in the lead, with Peo in second, Michael Curves and Jeffrey on the second row of the grid, followed by Martin Palmer and Matteo in row 3, Chris Redman and Jeffrey in row 4, Eric Rotterdink and Darren Adams in row 5. His teammate Luca just behind him in P11 and Thomas Blackett in P12. Itamar Yativ and Simon Geimer in row 7. Kostya Ho and Thomas Erzin in row 8. Avi and Nathan in row 9. Chris Thorpe and Paul McLeod in row 10. And Marek and Jens making up the rest of your grid. So we will go to a quick advert break before the start of the race. So here we are for the start of round 3 of the Nurburgring of the core GT3 league. As the engine notes begin to rise, we have 5 red lights, and they are out as all the drivers get off to a nice and clean start. As they all come filtering down. That looks like there's a Porsche going too wide with someone. I'm not sure who that was. As that's pretty sure that's Jeffrey up, making a move on Ross. As they all come piling down into turn 1, getting it through nice and cleanly. As you see, Peo managing to get up into P2. As you see, all the drivers coming piling down into the Mercedes arena, getting it nice and clean through there. A lot of drivers going too wide, as that's Luca behind his teammate Darren Adams, as both of them are going 2 abreast down into turn 6. As that looks like this Thomas Erzin is going side by side with someone. Darren Adams still going side by side with Itamar Yativ in the Audi R8, as Luca is decided to slot in behind Thomas Blackett. He's down into P13. As we come on back to Eric Rotterding, closing up quite considerably onto the back of Jeffrey. They all come piling out of the hairpin, as that looked like Jeffrey got very sideways. Will Eric be able to capitalise? No, he decided to slot in behind through the Mercedes arena, as that's Simon and Avi going side by side into Mercedes into Schumacher S's, sorry, and Simon managing to make it done. As that looks like Darren Adams and Eric Rotterding are side by side. Eric going to have the inside, and the GTR, powerful beast, down in a straight line. He's going to hold the inside, however he clips the curb, and that's a collision there between Darren Adams and both Darren and Eric into the wall. That is a huge collision between those two. That's very unfortunate for Darren and Eric. As you see, Jeffrey in P8 currently. Hopefully both of those drivers, Eric and Darren Adams, are unharmed. As we come to Avi and Thomas Blackett there side by side as they come on down into turn 1. Thomas Blackett going to have the inside, managing to make the move stick. Will Avi look for a move on the exit? No, he slots in behind. As we come on back to Peo and Ross. Will Ross be able to make it a double race victory? We will have to wait and see, as Peo is just behind now, 0.4 seconds separating the two. As you see, Luca catching up to the back of Itamar. Luca looking for a move up the inside, but not being close enough to make anything done. Dipping a slight wheel over that inside curb, getting it nicely hooked up with the right-hander. But you see, Jeffrey has really closed up the gap to Matteo. However, it's stuck on the outside through the right-handed hairpin. However, it does look like he may have the run out, as they are side by side down into the Schumacher S's. Jeffrey deciding to back out. However, he is very sideways in halfway through, managing to get it off the track so he doesn't get pummeled by another driver. As that's Ross dropping down a place into second place, as Peo makes a move up in front, as that's Darren Adam unfortunately retiring from the race. May have been from the damage of that collision between Eric and Darren. Unfortunately, Ross may have made a mistake, as he has dropped off quite a bit from Peo, up in the lead now. As we come on down to Jens Roos and Costi Aho, as both of these drivers have closed up quite considerably. Costi, I believe he qualified quite a lot higher up, so he may have had a collision with someone. You see both these drivers coming down into the chicane, getting it nice and clean. As we come on to Jeffrey in the slipstream of Chris Redmond, not being able to make anything done as of yet. As that's both Michael and Chris going very slow through there. Unsure whether they may have had a collision, however they've both dropped down, and Martin Powell managing to get past Chris Redmond, and he's looking for a move on Michael Curves as well, as both these drivers separated by just a few tenths of a second, coming through the Mercedes arena through turns 4 and 5 as they dash down into turn 6. This left-hander Getting it nicely through there. Michael's trying to build as much of a gap as he can. However, Martin is chasing him down, just 0.2 seconds separating them as they come on down into the chicane. Martin's thinking about a move up the inside, but not being close enough to make anything done, as Chris Redman is now putting pressure onto Martin as they all run up to the Schumacher S's. Getting wheeled nicely on the inside by Michael, taking it nice and clean through there, as these drivers have now separated quite a bit, 0.3 seconds separating them as they come on down through turns 10 and 11. Michael getting it nicely through there as these three drivers up the front have closed up, 0.7 seconds separating them all. As Ross is currently in the soft sandwich, it looks like Martin may look for a move up the inside of Michael. Not being able to make anything done as they come through the chicane up into the final turn. As we have a look at the tyre strategies, your leader Peo is opting for the soft tyres in the Z4 with Ross on the medium tyre. Sorry, Peo in the 650S with Ross in the 650Fs, however opting for the medium tyre with Jeffrey on the soft tyre as well, also in the 650S, so it's a 650S top 3 with Michael Curves holding up to P4, however is coming under threat from Martin Palm. Michael on the medium tyre with Martin on the soft tyre as they're getting it nice and clean through the Mercedes arena as we come on down to P18, the battle between Jeffrey and Costi. Costi managing to get past, however, has run wide through turn 2. Jeffrey slotting it up nicely into the inside, however they're side by side down into turn 4, a little bit of contact there, which allows Jeffrey to get up in front as we come on to the battle between Martin and Michael. Will Martin look for a move up the inside? No. He decides to back out and look for a move somewhere else. They're coming through the long right-hander, keeping it nice and clean. It's come through the Schumacher S, a slight dip of the wheel for one of the drivers, as it looks like Ross has dropped off quite considerably from Martin, now 1.2 seconds separating him and Peo, as that's Jeffrey also closing the gap, 0.5 seconds separating them as they come on down the long straight into the chicane. Ross, one of the only painted 650S's. Unfortunately, his teammate Nickel Foggy isn't here this week, so we'll have to see how that shapes up the championship. As you see, those three drivers of P4, P5 and P6 all fighting for position. Martin Palm just behind Michael, as quite a gap is gaining between those two, as you see Jeffrey catching up to the back of Paul McLeod, Eric Rotterding's teammate. Both of them in the GTR as Jeffrey looks for a move up the inside. Paul McLeod trying to hold it on the outside. He may have the power in the GTR to keep out in front of Jeffrey, however Jeffrey will look for a move up the inside. As it looks like Paul is able to gain a bit of a lead to Jeffrey, as it looks like Costi was looking for a move around the outside, however both of these drivers are still side by side as they come on down into turn 2. Jeffrey getting the move done nicely as we move up to Chris Thorpe, catching up to the back of Marek. Marek also one of the new drivers to this race, at least. We'll have to see whether he joins for the rest of the season, as the gap is now increasing between those two as we come to Paul McLeod and Costi Aho. Costi closing up the gap to about 0.2 seconds to the back of Paul McLeod. Paul looking very comfortable in that Nissan, however it is losing quite a few places, as you can see his teammate in the distance, Eric Rotterding. 0.4 seconds separating them as Peo comes up to the chicane. The gap is still 1.1 seconds separating him and Ross, so it looks like Ross has got back into the rhythm and is trying to hunt down Peo in the lead. So as Peo starts his 6th lap, your current grid, your current result, no, not result, I can't think of the word. Anyway, Peo is in the lead, followed by Ross and Jeffrey, followed by Michael, Curves, Chris Redmond, and it looks like Martin Braham nearly ran wide into turn 1, which allowed Matteo in 7th to catch up. Unfortunately, Jeffrey retiring from the race. I'm unsure whether he may have had a collision with a wall. However, Lux in P8 with Thomas Blackett, Avi and Thomas Erzen in Ps 9, 10 and 11. Simon Geimer in P12 as we come to Chris Redmond catching up to the back of Michael. Chris Redmond racing in the Black Widow racing team. 0.2 seconds separating them now. Will he look for a move up the inside? No, he's not close enough to make anything done. He does look to stick his nose up the inside. However, not being close enough to make anything done. As Costio goes side by side with Paul McLeod, not being able to stick his nose up the inside. So Paul McLeod holding to 14th as Costi is stuck in a Delta Racing sandwich, a Nissan GTR sandwich, as he's looking for a move past. We'll have to see whether team orders come into play and whether Paul will try and hold up Costi for as long as he can and try and allow Eric to get past as they come through the Schumacher S's. Nice and clean through there as we come to the battle between Chris Redmond and Michael Curves. Chris still not being able to get close enough to make a move. Still about 0.7 seconds separating them. As you see, Eric Rotterding right on the back of Costi, as it looks like he has sustained a bit of damage to his front windscreen after the collision between him and Darren, ending up with Eric being in the wall as they've gone side by side through the chicane. Eric managing to make it done. What a move through there. However, Costio is looking for a move around the outside but not being able to make anything done. As we come on to Martin Palm and Chris Redmond. Martin Palm 0.4 seconds separating him and Chris Redmond. He's managed to close the gap quite considerably. As you see, that's Matteo and Luca just behind them, as Luca is the only driver left for Apex Predator Racing. Darren Adams unfortunately retiring and Hines not being here this week in the Lamborghini. So we'll have to see how the team standings play out, as the NLR driver of Nickel Foggy isn't here either for this race. As you see, Martin Palm just behind Chris Redmond, getting it nicely through the Schumacher S's as Chris Redmond makes a slight mistake, dips a couple of wheels on the inside. That has caused him to slow quite considerably as they come side by side down into turn 10. Martin managing to make the move done nice and cleanly, does run slightly wide, however manages to hold his position, as there's still 0.2 seconds separating them. Chris may have the slipstream, so he may look for a move up the inside into the chicane. He decides to slot in behind as there's 0.3 seconds separating them now. As we come to the battle between the two teammates, Paul McLeod letting Eric Rotterding past. As that's Jens losing a place to Marek in the Porsche. Jens had a very strong race at Spa last weekend. However, is dropping down the order this week. Unfortunately, currently sitting in P18. As we come on back to Chris Redmond and Martin Palm. 0.4 seconds separating them still. As you see, Avi is caught up quite considerably to the back of Thomas Blackett. Avi in the Ferrari 488, Thomas Blackett in the 650S, both on the medium tyre. So we'll have to see how that pans out. 0.5 seconds separating them still, as Jeffrey has closed the gap quite considerably to the back of Ross. Ross dropped off 2.5 seconds now to Peo. Ross driving an amazing defensive drive Jeffrey not being able to get past as of yet. Jeffrey sitting nicely behind Ross as they come on down into turn 10. As you see the flames from the back of Ross's car, McLaren opting for the exhaust to be in the middle and quite high up of the rear bumper. Does mean that the flames end up in the rear driver's face nearly. They are very close behind in the braking zone. As you can just see, very big flames coming out of the back of that McLaren as it comes through the chicane as they head on down into the final corner. Peo still your leader of the race, with Ross McFarlane behind, as that's Itamar Yativ down in 21st and has caused Peo to catch up to the rear of him. So we will see whether he gets out of the way, which he does, which allows Peo to get past. I have to see whether Ross is able to get past cleanly, as well as Thomas Erzin is caught up to the back of Thomas Blackett. The two Thomases, they are side by side down into turn 1, as there's a bit of contact there, and Thomas Blackett has ended up in the wall. A bit more contact as Thomas Blackett ends up going straight across the front of Thomas Erzin. Thomas Blackett, they are still side by side. Thomas Blackett going to have the inside through turn 4. Thomas opting to stay behind. Unfortunately, both the drivers having a bit of contact, and it looks like Thomas Blackett has sustained a bit of damage to the front windscreen, unfortunately, which he has. Which may mean he has had a bit of front damage, which could affect the rest of his race. As you see, Thomas Erzin not backing out from this fight. Eric Rotterding sitting in P14 after his collision with Darren Adams, catching up to the back of Nathan Lockie. Nathan going defensive into the chicane. Eric running slightly wide, going to look for a move on the exit. He isn't able to make it done, however does look for a move around the outside of the Schumacher S's. Fakes right, goes left, decides to back out of the move. Very smart move by that Dieselted racing driver. As it looks like Michael Curves is still sitting in P4. Martin Parr managing to make a move past Chris Redman. Unfortunately, we missed it as we come on back to the battle between Thomas Erzin and Thomas Blackett. These two were battling at this point on the last lap. Will Thomas look for a move again? Thomas Blackett goes defensive. Thomas Erzin deciding to sit in the slipstream for as long as he can. Slight lock up there as they come through turn 1. Thomas still on the outside as they're side by side down into turn 2. Little bit of a door bang there. Little bit of rubbing wheels. As it looks like Thomas Erzin is up in front now. As it looks like Thomas Blackett is coming under threat from I believe that is Simon Geimer. So now Thomas managing to make his move past down, so he is up into P10 with Thomas Blackett in P11 and Simon Geimer in P12. Eric catching up to the back of Nathan again. They are side by side down into turn 6. Eric managing to make the move done, so he will focus his sights onto the drivers up in front, as it looks like Luca has caught up to the back of Chris Redman. Chris Redman down in P7. He must have made a mistake as he was up in P5. So we'll have to see whether Luca is able to make a move or not. As they come on down into the chicane. Luca right on the back of Chris Redman then. Not even a tenth separating the two as they come through the final turn. Luca not being close enough to make anything done as of yet. Amazing looking helmet for Luca. The fire and the 2 checkered flags on his helmet. As there's now 0.6 seconds separating him and Chris Redmond. Chris Redmond able to get a bit of a breather in now. As your closest battle currently is between Jeffrey and Ross. Jeffrey closing up to the back of Ross down into the hairpin. That seems to be a place where Jeffrey is very strong and Ross is not as strong in, as Jeffrey does seem to be able to keep closing the gap as they both get past Itamar. As we head on down to the battle between Simon Geimer and Thomas Blackett. Simon, a new driver in the Porsche in the Martini racing livery. Will he look for a move up the inside? Thomas Blackett going defensive. He will have the inside for his long right-hander. Thomas still out in front, as there's still 0.2 seconds separating the two. Simon was looking for a move up the inside, however not being close enough to make anything done. As we come to the battle between Jeffrey and Ross, as the gap closed down to 0.1 seconds then, however not being close enough to make anything done. Simon and Thomas Blackett still very close between these two, battling for P11. As both drivers go very wide, Thomas Blackett going slightly wider as they come on down side by side into this right-hander. Simon getting out nicely in front and managing to gain a bit of a lead over Thomas Blackett as well, which has enabled him to get a bit of breathing space as we come to Jeffrey and Ross. Will Ross be able to make it a double race victory? We'll have to wait and see. 0.4 seconds separating the two. The soft tyres, however, will start to go off soon, as we are heading towards the halfway point. Just another 3 more laps. As you see Jeffrey trying his best to close the gap to Ross. As you see, very close between these two drivers. Jeffrey trying to close the gap, as it looked like Ross nearly made a mistake. He has lost a bit of speed, however is able to hold on to second place. Gets it nicely out of turn 11 for the long run down into the chicane. Gets it nice and close to that inside apex, running all the exit curb as he possibly can. Getting it braked nicely for the chicane, as there's now 0.6 seconds separating the two. As we come on down to Chris Thorpe and Marek, as that's a very sideways moment for Chris Thorpe. He's ended up in the gravel. Will he be able to get it going again? He does. That was a huge moment for Chris Thorpe. Do you see Martin Palm closing the gap to Michael Curves? 0.8 seconds separating the two. As they head on down through turn 1. Michael getting quite a good run actually, and gaining about 0.1 of a second. Martin Palm is just not able to catch up to the back of that Ferrari. We come on to Jeffrey and Ross. Ross still sitting in that second place. Still only about 3 seconds separating him and the lead. It's not a very big gap, however it may mean that Peo will have the legs to run the rest of the race comfortably. See Jeffrey nearly closing the gap up in the hairpin. Getting it nicely through the Schumacher S's. 0.4 seconds separating them still as they come through turns 10 and 11. Gets it nicely through there, running all the exit that he can. .3 seconds separating them still as they come on down into the chicane to start their 14th lap. Peo still only 3 seconds up in front. Peo is still your race leader as they come on to lap 14. Ross McFarlane in second with Jeffrey in third. Michael Curves down in P4 with Martin Palm just a second behind him in P5. Matteo in the Lamborghini in P6 as it looks like Luca has jumped into the pits. So he is going for the undercut. He's down in P7 as Avi is now up into P8. Thomas Erzin in P10 manages to gain a place as that's Thomas Erzin up in front as well. Thomas Blackett diving into the pits as well. We'll have to wait and see what tyre Luca comes out on, as that's Eric up into P12 now, up into P11 actually after Thomas Blackett has pitted. So that's Thomas Blackett now coming out of the pits as Luca's now come out of the pits afterwards. He may have been repairing a bit of damage. I'm unsure, however, he has pitted for a longer amount of time than Thomas Blackett did. As we come on up to the battle between Jeffrey and Ross. Jeffrey still not being close enough to make anything done. The soft tyres will be going off by now. So we'll have to see how that plans into effect. Big pitch strategy needing to be used out of these races. Do you decide to go for the soft tyre and go for an undercut potentially, or do you go for the medium tyre and go for an overcut? Costia home in P16 sustaining a bit of damage. He is on the back of Paul McLeod, 0.3 seconds separating them as they come on down through the right-hander. Gets it nicely through there. As we watch from the rear of Paul McLeod. Really big wing makes it difficult to see the Z4 behind. However, Costi really closing the gap then as they come on down into turn 10 and 11. Paul McLeod still holding on, 0.4 seconds separating them still as they head on down to the run up the hill into the chicane. Paul McLeod still sitting out in front, 0.3 seconds separating them still. Paul McLeod using quite a lot of curb on the inside. Both drivers not opting to go into the pits as of yet, as you see Chris Redman in P7 on the back of Matteo. Chris Redman in the Porsche, Matteo in the Lamborghini Huracan. Chris still not being able to make a move as of yet, 0.3 seconds separating them, as it looks like he has got the run out of the hairpin as they come on up through the Schumacher S's. As Matteo getting a slight jump over the curb. They head on down into turn 10 and 11. As you see that spider on the side of that Porsche. Costia Ho and Paul McLeod going side by side down into turn 6. Paul McLeod driving defensive and managing to get out in front as we come on to Nathan Locke and Luca Peklaj. Luca in P14 currently, 0.3 seconds separating them still as Jeffrey has jumped into the pits. However, we are focusing on this battle between Nathan and Luca. Luca right on the rear of that Lamborghini. He looks for a move around the outside. They are side by side as they come on down into turn 10. Nathan gonna hold the position. However, Luca running very wide. He will have the inside through the right hander of turn 11. However, Nathan will have the run out, and being in the Lamborghini, having a bit more horsepower than the Z4, he will be able to get alongside at least, which he does as they come on down into the braking zone for the left-hander. Nathan deciding to back out. Wise move by them. As you see, Chris Redmond in P6, 0.3 seconds separating him and Matteo still. As it looks like Eric has jumped into the pits as well. And it looks like Jeffrey has ended out in P10 on the soft tyre as well. As you see, Chris Redmond right on the back of the black Lamborghini of Matteo. Paul McLeod and Costi also deciding to jump into the pits. None of your front runners apart from Jeffrey have pitted as of yet. As that's a slight mistake from Matteo again, running slightly wide on the exit. Chris Redmond trying to capitalise on Matteo's mistakes, however he isn't close enough to get anything done. As we come on down to the battle between Alex and Jens Roos, actually. Alex up the inside of Jens. Gets the move, nice and done. He goes, I'll take that very much. And Chris Redmond is side by side with Matteo as they come on down into the chicane. Matteo holding his own up the inside. Chris Redmond deciding to sit behind. However, looks like Chris Redmond has dived into the pits. So we'll have to see where he ends up. As it looks like Peo and Martin Palmer both jumped into the pits. So Ross is now your race leader as he starts his 17th lap. With Michael Curves just behind him as well. He hasn't pitted, and neither has Matteo in P3. So we have a look. The closest as Simon jumps into the pits. So have to see where all the drivers come out even. Avi up into P4 now actually, as after the pit stops, as you see Peo in P5. 5 seconds separating him and P4 after the pit stop. So it looks like Peo will have a little bit of work to do. See Ross rounding the hairpin. So he's caught up to the back of Paul McLeod, I believe, and Jens. Paul McLeod now running in 20th after his pit stop as Ross flashes Paul McLeod up in front, hoping to get past as cleanly as he can, which he does, trying to waste as little time as he can. As he comes up to the back of Jens now. So he will look for a move past. As we ride on board with your race leader currently. As Jens gets nicely out of the way. You can see getting it nice and clean through the chicane. We'll have to see whether he dives into the pits as of yet, which he doesn't. So he decides to stay out on the medium tyre. He may look for a medium soft stim. We will have to wait and see. As it comes on to start his 18th lap. As we come to Luca, who's running in P10 now after his pit stop. Trying to catch up to the back of Thomas Blackett, 2.2 seconds separating him and Thomas. So we'll have to see whether that makes him whether he'll be able to close the gap, as Michael Curves has dived into the pits now. So we'll have to see whether where he comes out. He's hoping to end up behind Jeffrey, I believe. So we will come with Peo and Jeffrey, as it doesn't look like Michael is able to get out in front of these two drivers. However, he is slotted in just behind, as that's Martin Palm now coming past Jeffrey as Michael Curves as well, which means Martin was able to get the overcut, I believe, as he was behind Michael before the pit stops. However, both of these drivers really close proximity to each other, just a second separating them. As you see Ross coming through turns 10 and 11, so I believe that is Alex Parsons in P17, the back marker for Ross. You see Ross off in the distance. We'll have to see. This really will give you a perspective of the speed difference between these two drivers. As we come to the battle between Thomas Erzan and Nathan. Thomas getting the move nicely done as Simon comes around the outside as well. Both drivers managing to make a move on Nathan, as it looks like Ross has dived into the pits. Matteo still deciding to stay out on that medium tyre, with only roughly 11 laps left of the race. We'll have to see whether Ross decides to come out on the softs. You see Luca catching right up to the back of Thomas Blackett, getting a nice drive out of that corner, a little bit out of shape, as he gets a marvellous run down into the straight for the chicane, as Simon Geimer managing to make a move on Thomas Erzan in the pink McLaren, as it looks like Avi decides to jump into the pits. Luca Peckley right on the back of Thomas Blackett. Just 0.2 seconds separating them now as they come on down. And it looks like Ross has ended up 3-4 seconds behind Peo. So his overcut has not worked. However, he is on the soft tyre now. So we will have to see whether that makes a big difference. He's going to have to make them last to the end of the race. Matteo up in the lead now. However, he has not pitted, so we'll have to wait and see how that comes into effect in the end result, as he catches up to the back of one of the Delta Racing drivers. That's either Eric or Paul McLeod. I'm unsure as of the moment. I believe that is Paul McLeod, which it is. We'll have to see. He decides to dive out of the way. Matteo still deciding to stay out as he comes on to his 20th lap. Let's hop on board for a lap with this Lamborghini Huracan GT3 being driven by Matteo, as it's hard onto the brakes down into first gear for turn 1. Getting a nice drive out of the corner. Shifting down into second for turn 2. Coming down into turn 4. Getting nicely on the first half. Getting a nice drive out for the second, as he's hard onto the brakes for turn 6 and 7, down into second gear for the long right hander. Have to be very careful not to get onto the power too early. Gets it nicely down into the hairpin. Nice and clean through there. So using all the inside curb through the Schumacher S's. Ross still not being able to close the gap to Peo as of yet. Still 3 seconds separating the two, so Ross will have to drive a crazy race if he wants to be able to catch up. So we get a nice GoPro shot of Matteo from his helmet. So using all the exits, still opting not to go into the pit, so obviously he must feel that his tyres aren't going off too badly. He goes with a 1:56.4 last lap, so we'll have to see whether Peo is able to go any faster on the soft tyres. As he rounds the final corner, he goes with a 1:55.3, so Matteo lost about a second that last lap alone. so he will be looking to jump into the pits, as Ross closing the gap slightly to Peo, however not sizable enough for him to be able to catch up by the end of the race, as there's only 10 laps remaining. Matteo still your race leader, however he hasn't pitted as of yet, which means Peo is your race leader after the pit stops. Ross in P3, Martin Palm in P4, however, is being chased down by Michael Curves. Jeffrey in P6, being followed by Chris Redman and Luca in P7 and 8, with Thomas Blackett and Avery making up your top 10. As we come to the battle between Jens Roos and Alex. Jens and Alex side by side down the straight. Jens will have the inside for turn 1, managing to get its nose out in front. Alex nearly outbraking himself. Jens gets the move done nicely, as that's Nathan into the pits now as we come to Simon. Very sideways moment for Avi, very sideways, a little bit of contact to the rear of Simon, however nothing too notable. Very good drive by Avi to hold that big sideways moment as he comes under threat from Thomas up the inside now, not being close enough to make anything done through turn 6 as they come on down into turn 7. Thomas will look for them run out to make a move down into the hairpin. It looks like he is able to do 0.2 seconds separating them. He doesn't look for a move up the inside, decides to stick behind. As we come to Martin Palm and Michael Curves, 0.5 seconds separating the two. As they come down through the final corner to start their 23rd lap. As we come to Thomas and Avi. Thomas going to stick with the inside for turn 11. Gets it nicely up the inside. As it looks like Matteo is into the pits. He's now out of the pits in P5 ahead of Jeffrey. Avery goes straight across the inside of turn 1 and loses quite a lot of time. As you see, Avi 0.2 seconds separate him and Thomas, as the gap slowly increases between the two. Martin Palm and Michael Curve still 0.4 seconds separating the two, very close between these drivers. Ross lapped on 1:55.1 last lap, and Peo lapped on 1:55.8, so he is gaining quite a lot of time onto Peo on the soft tyres. However, will they last to the end? We will have to wait and see. As Jeffrey is going side by side with Matteo. Matteo opting for the inside, he's opting for the medium tyre as well. Jeffrey not being able to make it done. Matteo squeezing him onto the exit curb. As we come to Nathan Locke and Paul McLeod. Nathan right on the back of Paul, fakes right, goes left, decides to back out of the chicane. As he's gone very wide, unfortunately getting very sideways on the first turn of the chicane, losing quite a considerable amount of time to Paul McLeod. He tries to get the car started again. Very dirty tyres, makes it very hard. As Peo is able to get past, but we'll have to see whether Ross is able to get past as well. As it looks like Peo lapped at 1:56.2 and Ross lapped at 1:55.3, so again nearly a second faster. As you see Jeffrey coming to the back of Matteo, 0.3 seconds separating them as they come on down into the run through turn 1. Jeffrey not being close enough to make a move. Gets it nicely on the rear of Matteo. Still 0.3 seconds separating the two. As we hop on board with Jeffrey, currently on the back of Matteo. As you see, Jeffrey has really closed the gap to Matteo. Matteo making a slight mistake out of that right-hander. Jeffrey right under the rear wing of that Lamborghini. Looks for a move up the inside. Jeffrey just Matteo deciding to drive defensive, sorry. So Jeffrey isn't able to make anything done. However, he is just 0.2 seconds behind as they come on down through the Schumacher S's. Both drivers trying to get as best of a run as they can. However, it looks like Matteo is able to stay out in front. As we come to the battle between Alex and Jens. 0.6 seconds separating the two. Alex not being close enough to make a move as of yet. However, he has closed up the gap quite considerably as they come on down into the hairpin. Not being close enough to make a move. As you see Jeffrey on the back of Matteo. 0.2 seconds separating the two, as that is a back marker. I'm unsure who that is. I think it may be Marek, I'm unsure, however. No, it's Chris Thorpe, as Matteo makes a move up the inside of Chris Thorpe, and so does Jeffrey. So Matteo unfortunately not being able to make a gap to Jeffrey, trying to use traffic. As you see Jeffrey on the back of Matteo, 0.4 seconds separating them still. As they come on down to the run into the hairpin, as it looks like one of the drivers goes very wide. That's Martin Palm running wide through the chicane, and that allows Michael Curves to get up into P3. As we come to Ross, closing the gap quite considerably to Peo. 1.3 seconds separating the two, as I believe that's Eric or Paul McLeod letting Ross to go past. As you see Ross closing the gap quite quickly to Peo. Ross making the back-to-back race victories look possible. As we come to the battle between Nathan and Chris Thorpe, 0.2 seconds separating the two. Nathan in the Lamborghini, Chris Thorpe in the Ferrari 488 GT3. 0.2 seconds separating them as they come on down into the chicane. Nathan not being close enough to make anything done. Chris Redmond coming up the inside of Chris, and up the inside of Chris Thorpe there. As we come to Jeffrey and Matteo. Jeffrey still 0.2 seconds separating him and Matteo. Not being close enough to make anything done as of yet. 0.3 seconds separating them still, as this gap does slightly close through the left-hander. Jeffrey looking for the run out of the turn. However, not being able to make it done as of yet. That looks like Simon Geimer is dropped down the order. Unsure whether he may have ran wide or something. However, he's now down into P12. So we come on back to Jeffrey. As we hop on board. You see, trying his best to close the gap to Matteo, but not being able to get close enough to make a move. As you see, Matteo running slightly deep. That has allowed Jeffrey to really catch up to the back. However, Matteo does have the run out of the turn. We come on to Ross, right on the back of Peo now. 0.5 seconds. Ross is really charging. Just 0.2 seconds gained that last lap. However, Ross is now just 0.5 seconds behind Peo as they come on down into the chicane. Just 5 more laps left of the race. Ross still not being able to get close enough. However, he has been on a charge all soft stint, so we'll have to see whether he can get past by the end of the race, or whether Peo can stick his elbows out and defend his lead. As we come on to Eric Rotterdink on the back of Avi. Not being close enough to make anything done. Will he look for a move up the inside? No, he's not close enough. He decides to slot into the back of that Ferrari. Eric, one of the only drivers racing in the GTR, along with his teammate Paul McLeod. As he's closed up the gap quite considerably, he looks for a move up the inside there, side by side down into the chicane. Not being able to make it move. It was ambitious. Thankfully, both of the drivers not causing a collision, as Ross is caught up 0.3 seconds down into the long right-hander. Ross's tyres will be slightly less worn than Peo's, which has allowed Ross to catch right up to the back of Peo. Peo nearly nearly a second slower that last lap, sorry. As there's still 0.3 seconds separating the two 650S's. One in that grey and the other in the black, green and white paint scheme done by Lux Liveries. As you see, 0.2 seconds still separating them as they come on down into the chicane. It will not be easy for Ross to make a move as we come on to the battle between Jeffrey and Matteo, still not being close enough to make a move. Still just 0.2 seconds separating the two as we come to Eric and Avi. Avi running very wide and dipping a wheel onto the gravel. Fortunately not causing the rear end to slide out and him potentially losing more places. Great driving by him, managing to keep it in a straight line as we come to Ross and Peo in through the Mercedes arena. Coming down into turns 4 and 5. Getting it nicely through there. Ross right on the back of Peo. Peo still not being able to shake Ross from his tail, as it looks like Ross may have the run down into the hairpin. No, he's not close enough to make anything done. However, he is right on the rear tail of Peo. Really closing the gap under that braking zone. Ross looking for the run out of the turn. Managing to nearly get it done, however, isn't close enough for a move up the Schumacher S's, so we'll have to wait and see for a move somewhere else. 0.4 seconds separating them as they come on down into turns 10 and 11. Still 0.3 seconds separating them too, as that's Ross running slightly wide. That has caused him to not be able to make a move down into the chicane. Still 0.3 seconds separating the two. As you see, Jeffrey also not being able to make a move on Matteo. However, he is right on the tail of that black Lamborghini. Will he look for a move up the inside down into the chicane? There's just 0.1 seconds separating them now. Matteo deciding to go defensive. Jeffrey goes for the racing line. Matteo will have the inside. Jeffrey being stuck on the outside, as that has allowed Chris Redmond to catch right onto the back of Jeffrey. Jeffrey having to go defensive to defend from Chris Redmond. Chris Redmond managing to get the cut back down onto the final straight. Bit of contact there between the two, as Chris Redmond and Jeffrey are side by side coming down into turn 1. Still side by side, who is the bravest between the two and brakes the latest? It looks like they braked about the same point, as they are still side by side coming down into turn 2. Slight tap of the wheels between the two. And again, slightly banging doors. However, Jeffrey does end up getting in front of Chris Redmond. That has allowed Matteo a bit of breathing space from these two drivers who are battling out behind them for P6. As Chris Redmond is slowly closing the gap to Jeffrey. 0.3 seconds still separating the two. Will Chris be able to make a move on Jeffrey and maybe even Kangaroo up into P5 and manage to jump over Matteo as well? As that looks like Ross and Peo are side by side down into turn 10. Ross being stuck on the outside. He keeps it pinned, however, and keeps on the inside for turn 11. Trying his best to avoid contact, ends up slotting in behind Peo. Ross trying his best to make a move with only 3 laps left of the race. 0.1 seconds separating these two still. Ross right on the rear of that grey McLaren. As it looks like Peo didn't get the best of runs, however Ross not being able to capitalise as Peo goes slightly defensive. Peo going to have to really stick his elbows out as they come on to the 29th lap. Doesn't look like Ross is close enough to make a move up the inside into turn 1. However, he does look for the dive, and that's contact between the two. That has caused Peo to spin out. Ross being very dangerous into turn 1. However, does give the place back as that's Jeffrey in the slipstream of Matteo. Pops out to the outside. Matteo will have the inside. Jeffrey will look for the run out. He managed to get past Chris Redman as well. Matteo going very defensive into turn 2. So they come on down through turn 3 into turn 4. Chris Redman still just behind them, looking to stick his nose up the inside. As that looks like Ross has dropped down the order into P4. Big mistake there for him. That has cost him his potential for winning the race. It's unfortunate for him. He had closed that gap quite considerably. However, Jeffrey is on the back of Matteo. That means we can focus on this battle between these two. Jeffrey not being close enough to make a move. As it looks like Nathan is caught up to the back of Chris Thorpe again. Still 0.2 seconds separating the two. We'll have to see whether he's able to get it in the next 2 laps. As we come on to Chris Redman and Jeffrey. 0.2 seconds separating Chris Redman and Jeffrey, and 0.3 seconds separating Jeffrey and Matteo. As they come on through turns 11 for the run up the hill to the chicane. As you can just see the speed of that Lamborghini. Jeffrey having to go defensive as he's come under threat from Chris Redman. Chris Redman nearly getting the move done, however not being close enough. Does look for a move up the inside. He gets his nose and he's very sideways through the final turn. Manages to hold it. However, he has dropped off quite considerably to Jeffrey. That has ended his battle with Jeffrey as we come to Martin Palm and Michael. Michael in P2, Martin Palm in P3 after Ross's mistake. Martin still not being close enough to make a move. 0.7 seconds separating him and Michael. So we hop on board with Michael. You really get a sense of feel for what the driver can see. He's nearly out of shape on the exit, as that's Jens going slowly to keep out of the way of these leaders as he comes on down through the Schumacher S's. 0.4 seconds separating Michael and Martin. As you see, Peo just 3 seconds up in front, so that means that Michael could potentially get past into the lead. However, he will have to drive a crazy last lap if he wants to potentially get past. Do you see Martin Palm, 0.4 seconds separating him and Michael. As your leader comes onto his final lap. That looks like Alex going slowly to keep out of the way. Yes, your leader is on his final lap. As we come to the battle between Martin and Michael. If Martin wants to gain up a place on the podium, he will have to get past. However, it will not be easy, as Michael will extend his elbows as wide as he possibly can as we come to Jeffrey and Matteo, who have been battling all race. 0.3 seconds still separating the two. Jeffrey not being close enough to make anything done. However, he does close down considerably in the braking zone. 0.3 seconds still separating the two. Jeffrey not being able to get past. Still 0.2 seconds separating them as they come through turns 4 and 5. Jeffrey still not being able to get past that black V10 powered Lamborghini. As Chris Redmond is slowly catching up to the back of them, we'll have to see whether these two battling will enable Chris, to get up in front. See, Jeffrey has sustained a bit of damage, so that Jen's off in the grass. Jeffrey still not being close enough to make anything done. This is currently your closest battle on the track. 0.2 seconds still separating the two as they come on down into turns 10 and 11. Still not being able to make anything done. Peo coming through the chicane as he comes through the final turn to take the checkered flag. Gets it nice and clean down there. So he finished this race in P1. Has led for most of the race. So we come to Jeffrey and Matteo. Jeffrey not being able to make a move on Matteo. Ross ending up in P4, unfortunately, was looking to potentially win the race, however not, unfortunately, making a mistake. So your race results currently are Peo in the lead with Michael in second, Martin Palm in third with Ross in fourth, Matteo fifth, Jeffrey sixth, Chris Redmond in the Porsche in seventh, Luca running very wide through the final turn. However, does get through nicely, so he will take P8 with Thomas Erzin in P9. Very good first race for him, managing to make it into the top 10 with Eric Rotterdink making up your top 10. As you see, unfortunately, Paul McLeod stopped on the gravel. Avi taking up P11. Nice drive by him in the Ferrari. Simon in P12 with Thomas Blackett shortly behind him in P13. As you see, drivers coming across the line. So that is the end of round 3 at Nurburgring GP. So you will join us next week on the 25th of June, where we will be at the Red Bull Ring. We will see you next week. Goodbye.